Well, first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Very excited to get to spend the next 40 minutes with three experts in their field and getting to talk to all of you. The topic for today is just, given the overall macro, what's happening with, the pressure on finance teams to be super efficient while unlocking growth of the company. It's become more important than ever to unlock, very mindful growth for the companies. And more specifically for that, we're going to talk about how unifying all your spend so you have visibility into one system. It's critical for company and it unlocks a whole bunch of new capabilities which were not possible before. So towards that, I'm very privileged to join Andrew, Catherine, and Sean today, who are three esteemed Brex customers. But more than just being Brex customers, they're also deep experts in their field of managing, finances for very different stages of companies, taking the companies through growth. So with that, first I want to say thank you, Catherine, thank you, Sean, thank you, Andrew, for joining us. If you don't mind, we'll kick off with quick introductions, just quick name, title, and which company and what do you do there will be very helpful. Catherine, please take us forward.
Sure, thank you. Happy to be here, excited to talk about Brex and Unified Spend. My name is Catherine Spillane. I'm the Assistant Controller at Avenue One. Avenue One is a prop tech service platform, and we bring institutional investors to the single family rental asset class.
Welcome, Catherine. Andrew.
Hi, my name is Andrew Maher, and I am the head of finance for Superhuman. Superhuman is a supercharged email client for consumers and for businesses.
You're underplaying that. Can't live without my Superhuman client. Like, we would not get through email without that. So if you haven't yet tried Superhuman, please give it a shot. It's pretty amazing. And with that, Sean.
Hi, my name is Sean Soper. I am the controller and also the head of FinOps and accounting here at Alchemy. Alchemy Insights is a Web3 infrastructure company.
Awesome. Well, welcome again, all three of you. Obviously, as mentioned, all these three companies have been on Brex, but more importantly, we have learned a ton at Brex based on feedback from all of you and how to evolve the product, how to make sure we shape the product. But today, what I want to focus on is sharing a lot of insights on how, cutting edge companies like yours look at spend and managing spend on a single platform, and any best practices you have for our audience today and what others can learn from you. So before we even get into insights and amazing ways to go manage finances, which stuff to hear from you all on what does unified spend management mean to you. So we'll go in reverse order. Sean, would love to get your thoughts on saying what is unified spend and how do you think about it, how do you talk about it, and more importantly, why is it so critical to businesses today?
Yeah, I think unified spend management is our version of procure to pay 2.0. It's a very modern way of running virtual cards, P cards, bills, invoices, everything in aggregate within a centralized platform. And by consolidating expenses, the businesses can optimize their spending and make more informed decisions on the fly and improve their bottom line. It also helps with compliance and reduces the risk and overall fraud and error if there's mitigating controls built within the platform, as Brex does. And overall, it gives you a competitive edge.
Super valuable. By the way, I might steal the procure to pay 2.0 description of the unified spend. That's actually a pretty powerful way of balancing both compliance and the speed that you need. Catherine.
Sure. For us, unified spend is so important. We have about 250 employees all across the US and Canada. And as you can imagine, we end up having about 4,000 transactions a month. So to be able to kind of put a guardrail and sort of, wrap our hands around that through the visibility that Brex gives us on a real-time, day-to-day basis is huge.
Thanks for sharing that. 4,000 transactions a month. Wow, that's a good volume.
Yep.
Andrew, what does unified spend management mean to you, and more importantly, why it's critical to your company?
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of what Sean and Catherine both mentioned, essentially what it is it's centralized visibility and centralized control, meaning there's a single system that contains the majority of our expense data that pushes to our GL. And then within that same single system, we can implement levels of control to kind of manage that overall spend. And for us, that's critical. It's critical for us to be able to have greater insight into who's spending, where, and why, and then streamline our overall operations.
Super valuable. Thanks for sharing that. And one thing I forgot to mention before we kick this webinar off is obviously we'll get into a lot more details. There'll be a lot of content we cover. So if people have questions, they should feel free to put them in the Q&A tab. We'll get to some of those questions after I've had a chance to ask my set of questions to all these experts. So with that, I think shifting gears a little bit, obviously Brex enables companies to manage all kinds of spend, similar to what Andrew, Catherine, and Sean talked about, everything from basic T&E to actually doing travel, bill payment, and rapidly expanding operational spend, things like AWS bills or your Facebook and Google ads, and including benefits and stipends. That's what Brex has been built to do. But what I'd love to get a sense from all of you is, before you were managing spend using Brex, what did the system and process look like for your company? And just any insights from what the previous world was, how you got to it, and how you made the decision to be on that one would be valuable. So Catherine, we'll start with you. I'm just very curious, with the 4,000 transactions happening, how were they happening before you were managing using Brex?
So we've been around for 3 years. So 3 years ago, before we started using Brex, we were only about 20 people. So it was a little bit more manageable. We were on Amex, and we were using their sort of at work service. However, we were waiting till the end of the month to be able to see the actual transactions. There was no real time visibility. So if we had to rectify something, or if we had a question for someone, the card holder, we would have to wait until the month end. And, as I'm sure Sean and Andrew can attest, it's a very tight window to get reporting done. So if you're waiting on someone to answer a question, it's not really the most efficient. So we chose Brex mainly just because, we were expanding, and we needed to be able to have sort of more control over our spend and have the flexibility that Brex allows us to have.
And in addition to Amex, what was the backend process like? What were you using to track expenses or track the receipts?
Yeah, so that was pretty manual. It was downloading the statement and going one by one, and seeing if we had receipts. So very, very manual. So coming off of that was, mission number one. So it's definitely sort of a breath of fresh air to have the, visibility that Brex gives you, but also to enable the user to help us and have them have the ability to upload receipts and put in memos and have that sort of, have them self-serve a little is really nice.
Yes, definitely push the compliance on them versus on you guys. So
Yep.
It definitely helps. Sean, how did it look like at Alchemy?
Yeah, disparate systems. So a variety of different tools servicing for different needs. We'd have bill.com for invoicing. Yeah, we'd also have our bank issued corporate cards. We had them through B of A. And we actually used our payroll provider for reimbursements. So all three various systems, none of them talk to each other. And while one system actually was connected to the HRIS because it was processing payroll, it had that hierarchy built in. The other two did not. So you didn't have corporate cards that would be able to be governed by a issuance and approval workflow or anything along those lines, and neither with bill.com either. So having a unified approach to all of this has helped bring that together. And it's really streamlined the process. You have a lot less administrative work is what's already been brought up by Catherine in terms of like going and fetching statements from one system. And it's just a lot of latency that's built that you impose into your financial close process.
Interesting. So obviously latency, I think, and real-time finances are common themes, but it looks like in your case for Alchemy, there are also multiple disparate systems because there's bill.com and you need corporate cards and you need reimbursements, even though you're trying to pay the same company people employed. That's fascinating. Andrew, how is the setup for Superhuman?
Yeah, I think similar to Sean, it was sort of a hodgepodge of different systems. So we had Expensify for employee reimbursements, a bunch of corporate cards through our bank, which ended up being used for a variety of things. We started off with, this is our card for tech spend, and this is for, sort of general, this is for like G&A. And ultimately over time, those cards get sort of blended in with a bunch of different stuff. We use bill.com for invoicing, for processing invoices. And then trying to manage and track, similar to what Catherine said, receipts. So we have, I'm almost ashamed to say we had a Dropbox folder of a lot of our receipts, and looking through statements and trying to, connect said receipts that we got that we got from our AP inbox into Dropbox to that transaction on that credit card statement. Just a total mess, and just a lot of disparate systems I had to kind of juggle through.
I'm probably going to date myself by saying this, but you shouldn't feel too bad about Dropbox Link, because when I started sending receipts back in the day, I would usually used to fax them on a fax copy, and there was a single number of a processing BPO that we would send all our receipts to, and it was sat there to make sure like every receipt is going beep and it goes through. So we've come a long way, but I agree with you. Dropbox is probably not the best way to do it anymore either. A whole bunch of reasons, but thank you for sharing that. I think very different starting points, but I think the common themes was still the same, which is too much latency built in. So you want real-time visibility. You want to have compliance into spend right or not. And I think the common theme I picked up also is having 3 different systems, some connected to HRIS, different policies, different users, different ways to track, just becomes unscalable, especially given that's not where you want to spend your cycles on. So just curious now where you guys are with how to use Brex, and which kind of spend are already on Brex and which are not yet on Brex for you guys. Andrew, do you want to go first? Is it all consolidated on Brex yet, or is still going on?
Yeah, so we try to put as much spend in Brex as possible. So we no longer use Expensify, we no longer use bill.com. We really put everything into Brex. So that's all employee related spend, travel, stipends, team events, other miscellaneous spend. We put all of our departmental spend, at least as much as possible. All that lives within Brex and all that lives under its relevant budgets. And then, we really try to do this because it saves time. Every time an expense goes on a Brex card and not on an employee's personal card, that's one less expense report that we have to review. Every time a vendor payment goes on a Brex card, that's one less item on our weekly payment run that we have to go through, or it's one less line item in our what used to be sort of a large corporate card statement where we have to go through and reconcile. And so, for us, it's a huge time, it's a huge time savings. And then on top of that, as we've mentioned, we have real-time visibility into how we're trending on spend versus budget.
Super valuable. Catherine, how about you guys? What's on Brex already and what's not on Brex yet?
So similar to what Andrew said, we have all of our sort of employee spend, team events, all company-wide events as well, all on Brex. Basically everything that doesn't require sort of the business unit approval, if there's sort of variances in invoice, that won't be on Brex, just because we want that extra layer of approval, that those are reasonable. But everything that's sort of fixed and, kind of wanted to just, kind of go through on a regular recurring cadence is on Brex. What we, liked about, sort of evolving into Brex as well was we have budgets set up by department. And we have our department heads be the budget owners. So they have, real-time reporting on their side of what their team is spending and how they're trending in terms of, their monthly budget, which, for them was something that they didn't have access to before.
Wow. So you've dedicated full visibility into real-time spend back to the business units versus just managing at a finance level. Fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. Sean, how does it look like for you now with Brex?
Yeah, very similar to both Catherine and Andrew talking about the consolidated spend sitting in Brex. We've got physical cards, virtual cards, reimbursements, bills. We've even got ACH and wires that get remitted through Brex as well. And I selfishly will transfer as much as I can under the maximum FDI insured coverage on Brex Cash in order to just mitigate risk and remit payments that way. But currently everything resides in Brex.
Awesome. By the way, Sean, just a shout out. I think the fact that you guys needed a lot more money to be sent through Brex was one of the motivations why we raised the FDIC limit to 6 million. So a lot of operational spend was, one, we make sure like it's safe. The good thing is Brex is not a bank, so we can do amazing FDIC sweeps to put money in there. But your use case was one of the early motivations especially when the SVB crisis was going down. Like, wow, like we need to make sure if people are parking all the money to make these payments, it should remain safe. So thanks for that. Super valuable. Obviously, now that it looks like almost all, especially I think almost all, except for Catherine in your case, certain POs which might require extra level of scrutiny are on Brex right now. Just I think the three themes I've heard from you guys is obviously is real time, the compliance gets better, and in your case, looks like you can also delegate back the budget management to the teams themselves versus doing it centrally. Is there anything else that you've seen as a benefit of implementing either the controls or automation through Brex that we haven't talked about yet? Anyone?
I think the end user experience. Maybe it's one aspect that maybe gets missed. As finance, maybe there's times we focus less on sort of the kind of end user, be it employee or sort of internal stakeholder experience. But I've gotten such great feedback from our employees around. They love the app. That it's very clear. They understand how much spend they have left on a given budget. They love the flexibility of a virtual card or a physical card. Just all in all, just a really great experience. And I've always viewed it as, a tool is only as good as it's used. And so if my stakeholders aren't actually using the tool, it becomes somewhat useless. And so a good sort of end user experience is critical.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm sure my team would love to hear that, but also like it normally doesn't come up because like we barely get through compliance and control. But it's great to hear the user experience is actually as critical, especially as wearing the finance hat as an enabler for the company. You don't want to slow them down. You want to make sure that employees have great experience. Does that resonate with you, Catherine and Sean? Like, is the user experience a draw?
Yeah, it's huge for us. We actually have employees in the field that don't sit behind a desk. So the app is amazing. They love the fact that if you enable the notifications, it'll send you a text message. You can reply to the text message with your receipt. It'll apply it for you. That's highly used. And we even train when we do training on Brex, when people are onboarded, we make that point that, enable the app, always take a picture. You'll never have to come back and be like, I lost my receipt. I don't know where it is. So it's been huge.
Awesome. Sean, in addition to user experience, anything else that was a previous pain point, but we haven't talked about outside of obviously visibility and control?
Yeah, I would say that it's a huge difference between reimbursements, the way it was done previously through payroll processor. In fact, there was no mobile app for that particular reimbursement setup. So the fact that there's a mobile app is definitely increased the UX for our company. Then the other thing I'd say is the auto receipt generation function that is a key differentiator with Brex. That's been tremendously helpful in cutting down some of the administrative costs in T&E, and that's being used as well. And absolutely love the new travel perk through Brex. That's getting very well used, as well as both on the individual level as well as our company offsite. So.
Yeah. We haven't yet got into travel, but that's a good segue, Sean. Like, who else is using travel right now with Brex?
We might be. We're in the process of evaluating it, but I'm hoping to onboard it. But yeah, we're in the process.
And is travel back for your companies now? I know post-pandemic, most companies were refiguring out like what the norm should be. But where is travel in terms of your priorities to solve as a both experience problem but also compliance problem?
I think for us, we have, like I said, we have people all across the country. Our main office is in New York. So we have a lot of teams come in to the New York office. We have offsites where our entire company goes to one location. And we have that once a year. So tracking that is always a pain point. So I think having, why we want to put travel on for Brex is partly just the tracking that you can do where exactly where anybody is at any given time. Really helps in reviewing expenses to look for reasonableness and to see if a charge makes sense based on if they're traveling and where they're traveling.
Very helpful. Actually, that's probably going to be a good segue for me to ask the next question, which is obviously you're using Brex in a wide variety of ways. But if you were to pick your one favorite aspect of controlling spend using Brex, among whether it's offsites, whether it's budgets, it's delegation, it's receipt generation, it's one system. If you were to pick one of your favorite aspects of controlling spend, what would that be? Andrew, love it. Quick
Yeah.
wins.
I think for me, it would be, we have a financial forecast that has an expected amount of spend by department. And that ties to the departmental budgets we've created at Brex. And I love the fact that at any time I can have a real-time pulse on how we're trending on spend versus those budgets. And I have sort of a fixed control where I know if we do hit up against that budget, we can stop and have a conversation and kind of assess, do we need to invest more here or do we not? But that sort of connectivity between sort of what's happening versus sort of what we expect to happen is awesome.
Awesome. So forecasts and actuals are not a quarterly affair now. They're actually happening real time for you.
Yeah.
Love it. Sean, what's your favorite aspect of controlling spend through Brex?
Yeah, just the buildup of our huge Brex points that we have, and we actually use those Brex points for redemptions for travel, and so it's almost like a reciprocal relationship. The ability that for employees to use the travel and build up points, and then use those points for additional travel later on down the line. I would say is again a key differentiator with Brex, and it's one that works for us.
Thanks for sharing that. That's very, very insightful. Catherine, what would you pick as a top one?
I think just having the ability to control the reporting. We use a lot of custom rules for our GL mapping. And I think that has saved us a lot of time because, one vendor might have many, many GL codes that it hits depending on what it's being used for. And the fact that you can say, if this user is charging it and it's this vendor, I want it to go to this GL code, and that we have, I think, about 50 to 100 rules in there, and it's saved us a lot of, as I said, we have 4,000 transactions. So going through them one by one and recoding was a real pain point. So having these custom rules auto apply is amazing.
Very cool. Actually, out of curiosity, what ERP are you on?
We're on NetSuite.
NetSuite. Andrew?
We are in QuickBooks.
Sean?
QuickBooks, soon to be NetSuite.
Awesome. Actually, just a quick digression. One of the things I heard from someone recently was once you are on Brex, transitioning between ERPs becomes super easy as well. And I think I might be stealing that from you, Sean. I think you use this thing called the subledger on Ledger. Would love to, if you don't mind putting on spot asking that one, which is, as you think about ERPs and the role of Brex, how does having unified spend in a system like Brex help you with managing ERP transitions?
Yeah, similarly to inventory or receivables, like payables has a subledger. And when you have unified spend across your P2P stack, it is basically a life hack. If your finance team or controllership team is looking to migrate to an enterprise resource planning tool down the line and you're stuck with QuickBooks right now, it's a very good segue because effectively it's a subledger that both the end user has familiarity with, as well as vendors in terms of being able to submit to that one central repository to aggregate and then remit payment through. So effectively you can use the same system throughout the growth stage of your company as you get more level up in terms of your sophistication and complexity. You've got a AP subledger that can follow you through that journey.
Thanks for sharing that. For me, that was like a light bulb moment. It's like, wow, because similar to what Catherine mentioned, a lot of companies have US and Canada, US and UK and Canada, multiple locations, and even though they might be on NetSuite in one country, they're not on NetSuite in all countries, and transitions of ERP systems is more frequent than I thought would happen in the world. But the fact that there is a subledger system available with a P2P stack like Brex definitely helps the transitions easier. Anyway, I'll come back to track. Thanks for sharing that insight. That was really very powerful for us to also evolve the product further with. Obviously, you guys are finance, so everything starts with numbers. So I'm going to ask you to quantify how Brex has impacted your business. And obviously I'll ask each one of you, but more curious on if you were to quantify the impact both on the finance team, obviously your own teams, the employees in the company, and often overlooked audience within the managers who typically in the past had to do a lot of reviews and follow through on, is this expense valid, not valid? We'd love to get your read on, one, how do you just generally quantify the impact of Brex? And then if refer it, like how do you quantify from those three different audiences that you typically support or serve? Andrew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think in terms of quantifying it, for us, it's really around sort of time saved. And starting with sort of the finance team, as we've all mentioned previously, that level of sort of transparency and insight, it just means it's less time digging through and understanding what was this expense, how was it coded, is it approved, is it not approved. So there's transparency for sort of the finance team, and then separately, streamlining our close process. Our close process, as I mentioned before, was huge bank recs and corporate card statement recs, and now it's a push of a button and everything, pushes straight into QuickBooks, and it's already coded. And there's a review, but it's every month, tens of hours saved of just what would have been someone going through a statement, checking in a Dropbox folder, and just trying to understand sort of what are these transactions. On sort of the kind of manager or sort of like department lead level, again, I think time spent on understanding how are they progressing across their sort of budgets. And previously that either wasn't as clear, or again, it would be a lot of digging in to try to compile across different systems. Hey, this is sort of how we think we're doing. And that usually happened after the month closed. So it's not real time, but it's sort of after the fact. And then as I mentioned earlier, sort of lastly for employees, I think it's, again, time saved where they're using the mobile app, they're using their physical cards. And because they're using Brex and it's in that centralized system, Ben doesn't get creeped out into other areas. And so that, which again, kind of feeds back into sort of the finance team of it's all in one place. It's all sort of, rules already built so that it's all coded appropriately. And it's just this great feedback loop of employees love to use it. It all then lives in Brex. It's faster and simpler, and it's wonderful. So for us, it's we really quantify as time saved kind of across the board. And
just to put some kind of estimate on like what magnitude of time savings are we talking about? We're talking about minutes, hours, a few days, a month. How much do you think Brex helps?
Probably across the entire org, days a month, I'm sure. I mean, from the close process to finance reviews to sort of, within a department, their own sort of reviews or understanding of kind of how they're tracking, to then actual sort of employee usage. I'm sure it's days, days within a given month.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Catherine, how would you quantify the impact?
Similar to Andrew, I think, previously we would spend 10 to 20 hours just doing the close just for credit cards. And that is, super manual process. It's not efficient. And that's just from the preparer side. So then that had to go through review. That's another maybe, 2-3 hours. Having it all, as Andrew said, at a click of a button, to just, spit out the report. Everything's coded with the custom rules that we have. It's a big time save. Another sort of aspect of that is sort of from an FP&A standpoint, analyzing spend and tracking trends and, helping management make decisions based on, should we go to this conference this year? How much spend was this conference versus how much business did we bring in from this conference? That is something that we track on an ongoing basis and is a lot of ad hoc reporting that we give to management. So, being able to just do a filter in Brex for the certain users that we know when the days that they went there, it's the report right there for management. Do a simple pivot and it's done in minutes, as opposed to having that report take, someone a couple hours to put together.
Fascinating. And typically, is that an FP&A team that's running those reports?
So it's finance. We all, we just do it all. But Brex has, really helped us be able to streamline that and make it more efficient.
Super helpful. Sean, how would you quantify it?
Yeah, very similar story to Andrew and Catherine. It's basically a 2 to 3 days worth of savings in the financial close process monthly. and it's attributed to getting real-time insights into overarching spend. So we have budgets, we have an estimate of how much would be spent. If it's incongruent to what the business expects the results to be, then we can double click and figure out what's the difference. But getting that real-time visibility means when we move through a month-end close, we can double check throughout the financial close process to make sure that everything is in. I'd say that managers are, because they have the ability to create nested budgets with pre-authorizations and the coding that Catherine's already mentioned, it allows for expediency. You're not necessarily offloading all the administrative responsibilities, because effectively once these nested budgets are created, they're pre-coded, but then there's also stage gating mechanisms within the financial close process within Brex. So once all the coding and the expenses are matched up, then they go through the accounting module, which then goes through another level of review before we push it into our bookkeeping or ERP software of choice. So it really helps out streamline this process.
Perfect. And with this process becoming hopefully a lot more easy and automated, have you seen the compliance rates also go up or the effort rates go down in terms of the effort required, not just from time savings perspective of closing the book, but the number of transactions which actually have a receipt or a memo attached? How do you guys track that typically in how you report out the hygiene of the financial close process?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like anything else, controls up front is a lot better than, and then afterwards, postmortems, trying to figure it out. And the one thing that we don't like, in blockchain, any other place, is regulation by enforcement. We'd rather build the enforcement mechanisms on the very front end as opposed to coming in on the back end and then having to make corrections thereafter. Just operationally inefficient, and it just doesn't bode really well with the organization. Causes a lot of confusion. If you can set precedent up front, it's always better.
Super helpful. So if I were to just quickly summarize the three big themes, obviously saving a ton of time with book closing was definitely top of mind for all of you. And Catherine, you mentioned something interesting, which is the insights and the reportings on actual managing spend get unlocked because you can now have lots of different ways to cut the data, and seeing this real time helps you proactively. I think Andrew, you mentioned as well, which is you don't have to wait for a quarter to look back and saying, hey, I wish we had not spent money on this because we already spent it. Now you can actually talk about it real time that happens. And then Sean, making sure you're not trying to ask for forgiveness later because the regulations are upfront and you don't have to worry about how much the process adds. So obviously this points to a lot of work you guys have done upfront to set up systems correctly. I just would love to hear a little bit more thoughts, especially for the audience, on when they're thinking about picking the right provider for spend, whether it's Brex or someone else. What were your considerations based on now the experience you've had, and expertise you have on what works well, what scales well, and common pitfalls to avoid? So what criteria for you were the most important criteria when evaluating which spend vendor to go with? So Catherine, we'll start with you on not just how you landed with Brex, but more importantly, what were the variables considered when you were considering a new spend solution?
I think for us, it was how to enforce our expense guidelines across the company, and not having someone's sole job be, did you stay within the policy, having it actually in the system and having the system prompt the employee. So, if they didn't put a receipt in, they're going to get an email until they do. I think that was, the big push for us, is to be able to have something more automated, something that required, obviously some control, some touch, but was able to be deployed and consumed by the user and not have to have, a whole explanation on how to do it. It's pretty user-friendly.
Very helpful. Andrew?
I think for us, probably two different elements. The first was sort of operational flexibility. We loved the ability to create budgets, recurring one-off, have nested budgets. That was all that sort of aligned with sort of how we want to run the business. And so that was really interesting. And then also the flexibility of how to actually, what was the actual payment vehicle? Is it a physical card, a virtual card? We could spin up 1,000 virtual cards ad nauseum. That sort of infinite flexibility was really impressive, something that we were looking for. And then the other piece was kind of more holistically thinking through, we didn't just want to replace a employee reimbursement platform. We didn't just want to replace our corporate cards. We wanted to find, the right provider that could kind of subsume those different services, and sort of back to kind of unified spend management. I don't want to have these three different things. I want to have one that does it all. And if you can do all of it in a flexible manner, like that's even more awesome. So I think those are, for us, are sort of like the two kind of core elements.
Very helpful. Sean, did you have a similar criteria, something else your team looked at?
Yeah, very similar to Andrew and Catherine. The only thing I'd say is our consideration was also scalability. A system that would be with us for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe even 5 years, but the baseline being at least 3 years throughout the company's growth. So its ability to spin up infinite virtual cards and have governance up front, programmatic controls that then lend to more rigorous control environments down the line. Those were key things, key considerations for us.
Very helpful. Anything from your past experience, like, based on, obviously these are good criteria to go evaluate new vendors with, but now that you've implemented it, you've seen what works well, what doesn't work well. If you were to each give one advice to our audience on, hey, as you're thinking about better ways to manage spend, it could be a tool, could be a process, could be an insight, could be anything. If you were to literally give one insight, one advice to every other financial controller out there trying to figure out how to manage the spend better, what pearls of wisdom would you leave them with? Catherine, let's start with you.
I think for pearls of wisdom would be, evaluating what you want first. So like there's tons of systems, they all do different things. I think first to just, figure out what it is that you, in your ideal world, what would you want a system to do, and then start your evaluations that way. But I think, from using past systems in, prior jobs and also this job, the ability to just slice data at a moment's notice for however you want to. You don't have to go into individual expense reports. You can literally have it at your fingertips. Is something that I think sets Brex apart.
Thanks for sharing that. Andrew?
I think for us, the real aha moment was realizing, like Sean, you mentioned this earlier, sort of pushing providing each sort of end stakeholder with a budget and kind of pushing sort of the right control mechanism sort of upfront versus sort of the like asking for forgiveness spend. That for us was the real like, oh my gosh, by doing that, it's going to reduce the amount of asked for forgiveness spend, of the things you have to chase down, by pushing all that sort of upstream and they're in a really nice sort of user experience. But that for us really, as I mentioned, was sort of that like aha moment of like, oh wow, this is really powerful. This is going to be both something that I think the end user is going to really enjoy, but also is ultimately going to reduce the amount of manual sort of reconciliation that we have to do.
Thank you. Sean?
By way of advice, I'd say, oftentimes businesses start to consider how to, when I think better ways of managing spend, I think optimization. And while that could be one consideration, there's a precursor to that, which is indexing and getting data reliability. And so, I just cannot stress more so that data reliability is key prior to any optimization, any extrapolation thereof. So projections and forecasts built upon data that's unreliable, doesn't adhere to completeness, accuracy, cutoff, you're extrapolating the bad issues fundamentally. So getting with a platform that unifies spend helps to remediate some of this risk, as well as having programmatic controls built into the front end also help remediate some of this risk. And again, probably a very strong consideration for any P2P tech stack that an organization is looking to build out.
Very helpful. And I want to go back to something earlier you said, Sean, was about scalability of the system. Obviously, a lot of it comes through automation, which is pulling the systems together. That's the way, Catherine, you described going from 20 to hundreds of people wouldn't happen. How do you guys typically approach automation into your spend management?
I can speak to this. I would say that if the technology is available and you've got the front end controls built in, you can scale pretty quickly. Your policies built in and your controls built in. Just as long as you have that front end adherence, automation should be able to abstract away about 80% of your administrative burden. And that's really going to help out with the financial close process. I look as automation as an enablement vehicle for like a lot of things, not just on the spend side, but whether it's also facilitating a spin up of a virtual card or P card and have that work through your HRIS, integration with APIs to name your payroll provider of choice that would have that built-in hierarchy for approval. These are all powerful things that we can leverage in a modern tech stack for along with P2P.
Super helpful. And I know we're coming up to time, so I'm going to ask one little bit more open-ended question. I'm sure as financial leaders, you guys are always thinking about different ways to innovate, grow the business, while obviously balancing how you manage cost and control of the spend. Because efficiency is definitely the theme of this year, if not longer. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on, as you think about the future, what do you think and how do you think technology will help shape the world of finance, and especially enable financial leaders like you to either better control and manage spend, or do more automation, or any more wishful thinking like, hey, this is how we wish the technology would help evolve the financial world? What would that look like? Andrew, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's probably, just to think about kind of how we can leverage technology in the future, specifically within sort of like the finance tech stack. There's probably two elements. The first is, as we were just mentioning, sort of automating away the sort of manual work or the transactional work. And so leveraging technology to kind of continue to kind of automate away those reconciliations, processing transactions, et cetera. That's huge, because that obviously unlocks time for someone that would spend on that transactional work to then think about other ways to ultimately enhance the business. Separately, I think the other, and maybe even, that's, I think, almost like table stakes. I think then the other piece is how do we leverage technology to kind of surface insights and recommendations? So it's not just let's automate away a bunch of manual work, but it's thinking about how are we trending on spend versus budget, sort of preemptively flagging that trajectory. What are areas that we're potentially overspending or underspending? How do we leverage a ton of different data points to kind of build some sort of recommendation around like, hey, you're paying X for this, you should actually think about some other provider. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways you kind of draw those different insights out. But when I think about sort of like automating transactional work, and then sort of automating the sort of like insight / like recommendations of all the data that you have.
I'm sure my team is furiously taking notes on like what we can build for you for all of that. But with that, Catherine, would love to hear your thoughts as well. Like, how do you see technology helping you scale, the company scale, and just better manage finance?
Definitely. Just to piggyback off what Andrew said is, patterns is something that, we spend a lot of time going over, reporting. Management wants to see different patterns. I think the system itself, if it can identify, okay, everyone comes to the New York office and they all stay in different hotels, maybe you should think about the one hotel having a loyalty program there, or different ways to reduce costs by what Andrew was saying is recommendations is probably a really good way technology could help. I think also just being able to utilize a system to take the time off of our team and have the visibility. I think, making everyone a stakeholder, not just the finance department caring about spend, having, the department heads also care about spend because they're seeing it in real time, not, a stale report that's, a quarter old. They're able to kind of, take more ownership and responsibility as well.
Definitely. We want to make sure finance teams are not seen as a police, but
Yep.
department heads are. So that definitely resonates with everyone here. Sean, love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, very similar to Andrew and Catherine again. If we can abstract away the administrative burden, that time is a finite resource, should be leveraged for like insights and thinking about things upstream that are impacting the data, and then downstream effects from thereafter. Those are key things that I try to work with my staff to ensure that that time savings due to automation technology being leveraged to facilitate the speed of the close is going to be leveraged for flex analysis and understanding what's going on, the insights with the business, and not just the time for time's sake is, being saved. It should be leveraged. And this is, again, resonates with our founders as well. They tell me all the time, if you've got spare time, it should be allocated towards the biggest impacts. And that's how we can do it.
Indeed. And that resonates even at Brex. Like, we start with, making sure everyone's having the most impact with spending time on the most efficient things. And even though we all carefully did not use the word AI, I saw the themes emerging on, like, there's a lot of good data, a lot of good insights, a lot that machines can do to go aid all of our day-to-day, more human jobs to get it better. But that's very, very helpful. So I know we didn't get to a lot of audience questions. I mean, we're almost at time, so we will definitely take questions. And just want to take this time to thank you all. I learned a ton, and I'm sure the audience learned a ton as well. So thanks again for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And obviously, thanks for being amazing Brex customers.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Take care.